What's up, guys? EJ Stewart here, Kendall Stewart, giving you guys another NBA draft video. Today we'll be doing a new video we've never done before. We're going to be playing an NBA draft fact or fiction. Kendall, fact or fiction has always become like a figment of many sports conversations. So I thought, why not bring it to the NBA draft? There are plenty of kind of interesting questions and interesting storylines coming into this draft, and here I think it's going to be a good chance for us to really dive into some of these with some really interesting comments and statements that we're going to try to make in this video here.
Oh yeah, we know in our day and age, 2023, a lot of fake news is permeating throughout society, and
you don't say.
I think this is it's made its way into the NBA draft community as well, and so there's a lot of fake news going out there around some of these.
It's really ridiculous.
Some of these prospects, so I'm excited to tell the truth, as Will Smith likes to say, on some of these guys.
Yeah, man. So let's get to it. So this is going to be a fun conversation. So I want to begin with the first question here. The Charlotte Hornets should take Brandon Miller at number 2 in the NBA draft. Fact or fiction?
I'm going to go with fiction.
Wow.
I like Brandon Miller. I do not dislike Brandon Miller as a prospect. I think that positionally, I think he's probably the more ideal fit if best case scenario hits. I don't like the fit of Brandon Miller in the Hornets ecosystem. That's just me personally. I mean, I don't know if they have the locker room, to make that work. Doesn't mean that, he wouldn't be a good player if he got to Charlotte, but I just feel like we saw multiple guys go there that had real talent, and kind of fall apart. Malik Monk went there without the right structure, fall apart. We saw James Bouknight go there, and so far in his career, it's been absolutely nothing to show for it. I think that's a locker room in a franchise right now that you just need the right type of mental makeup to make it work. And I'm not saying it's not Brandon Miller for sure, but I'm just saying I wouldn't be comfortable taking that risk at number 2 when there's a guy like Scoot Henderson that seems like he definitely has the mental makeup to handle playing in that locker room, playing in that city, and while it's not the ideal fit next to LaMelo Ball, 2 ball dominant guys who are playing with each other. I think the Sacramento Kings have shown us that, when they took Tyrese Halliburton, that best player available still, reigns supreme in a lot of different ways, because the Kings could have said, we already have a point guard, so we're not taking Tyrese Halliburton, and that just would have been the wrong pick. When you take, obviously, when you're picking at 2, you have a little more options. There are probably multiple All-Stars that you could potentially pick from, but I think if Scoot ends up being the second best player in this draft, or even potentially the best player in this draft, then you say to yourself, we messed up. Even if we already had a point guard, you just gotta take the best guy. And I think that's Scoot here, particularly for this franchise.
It's funny, I've had Scoot at number 2 still on my board. I know Brandon Miller has risen to number 2 on other people's boards. I did cringe a little bit when I saw the Hornets get that number 2 spot, because to me, the ball Scoot fit is not great. I'm trying to talk myself into making it work, and it doesn't really work all that well in my head. But I'm actually still going to agree with you. I think that it's fiction that the Hornets should draft Brandon Miller. I think you make a good point about the fact that they brought in a lot of other guys into that locker room, into that atmosphere that have been immature. And we've seen some of these guys almost derail or some of them did derail their entire careers, not having the kind of leadership, not having the kind of direction there. When you talk about Miles Bridges, a guy who's not in the NBA at this moment, and is he dealt with his legal issues regarding domestic violence. And then you mentioned Monk, you mentioned Bouknight, who's been a bust so far. Miller has a lot of talent. I do wonder about where he fits from a culture standpoint for a team that I think clearly they brought in Steve Clifford almost as to me, he's a great coach, but they almost brought him in as like a babysitter. Like, it was just like, the thing got so out of control over there, and it was just kind of chaos. And he was there just to kind of reset things. Maybe having a coach like that would help him, But I don't think I'd take that risk given what I saw from not just that incident with the gun thing, but then the whole pat down stuff that was happening later on in that season. Sometimes he's a kid that I think, from all accounts, is a good character kid, but maybe doesn't quite get it sometimes. And I don't know if putting him next to some of these guys in that locker room is the best fit. It kind of reminds me of that, Kenny Smith story where he talked about playing with the Kings and playing for Bill Russell as his head coach, and Bill Russell wouldn't allow him to sit on the bus with the other players. He's like, why can't I sit with my other teammates? He's like, because they're losers. I don't want you to be a loser. I don't want Brandon Miller to be a loser. Like, I don't want him to go to this team because I don't think that it'd be a good atmosphere. I think Scoot is one of those guys where I think that he's so mature that I think you could put him anywhere and he'll be fine. I also think there's a great opportunity for the Hornets to maybe do a really hard reset by drafting Scoot and maybe kind of shopping LaMelo Ball. Ball gets injured a lot. Ball has not really shown that he could get the team over the top already. And it just feels like that's like a powder keg that's just waiting to blow. That another bad season and he kind of blows things up on his own. I think they may be smart to almost take maybe the Phil Jackson Knicks approach with Porzingis and see if maybe they can kind of like get him out there a little early. And maybe it was some shots on people. Maybe get him out there early before things really fall off with him, and maybe injuries derail his value, maybe attitude derails his value. I think now might be the good time to shop him. Now you're fully in the tank. Now you got another year, or maybe you're in the number one sweepstakes next year. So I agree. I think that the Hornets should not draft Brandon Miller at number 2. So we're both in agreement on that one. Okay, so let's get to the next one here. I want to ask you, Kendall, fact or fiction here? The Portland Trailblazers will trade the number 3 pick in the NBA draft.
I'm gonna go with fact. I'm gonna go with fact that this is not fake news, unlike the last one we talked about. But no, I think the Blazers will move this pick. I think for whatever reason, whether I agree with the mindset or not is not really important here. I feel like it feels like they're gonna try and one last hurrah this thing with Dame Lillard. I think this pick has value because I think that there is a real feeling around the league that there are 2 or 3 great players in this draft. I think especially if the Hornets do pull the trigger on taking Brandon Miller, which if I were to guess right now, I think they will, but it's still very early. But if the Hornets do pull the trigger on taking Brandon Miller, then I think you have real value in being able to chop around Scoot Henderson, who I think is still amongst teams is the second best player in this draft, especially when teams I think do more deep dive, more homework. I think they're probably going to be a little more comfortable with the guy. It's been in the NBA ecosystem now for 2 years, so they just have more information on him, and I think that while the point guard position, there aren't like a million teams that are dying to get a guy like that because there are a lot of teams that have point guards. It only takes a couple, it only takes 1 or 2 to make that move. So. I think this pick does get moved for a vet, probably packaged with Anthony Simons. I mean, if they were getting really frisky and they have the asset base to get another superstar next to Dame Lillard. Whether or not I think that's smart, a whole nother conversation. But with the combination of Simons and Sharp and number 3, I mean, you can get almost anybody you want.
Yeah, this is a team in an identity crisis mode to me, the Portland Trailblazers, because you mentioned you have like your Simons and your Sharps of the world and some of these other young guys that you feel like, okay, these are guys that clearly are players that, are years away from like being a team that can compete for a championship, let alone like win a couple rounds in the playoffs. And then you have Dame Lillard, this megastar, this Portland Trailblazers icon in their franchise, who has been kind of languishing in nothingness for the last few years as the Blazers have tried to find a way to turn this thing around. I think the Blazers understand where they are. I think they finally take that truth serum and know that it is time to trade Dame Lillard. I think that by the time we get to the NBA draft, Dame Lillard is out of there, and they kind of signal to their fans, signal to the NBA, this is now a true rebuild. It doesn't make sense any longer to hold on to him. The longer you hold on to him, the lower his value goes. If they hold on for another year, I think that'd be organizational malpractice. So I'm going to say this is fiction. I'm going to say that they do not trade this pick. I'm going to say they keep this pick and say, we're going to trade Dame Lillard. We're going to draft the number 3 pick in the draft, whether it's Scoot or whoever it's going to be. And then we're going to build around Scoot and build around Simon and build around Shaden Sharp and really go into next year. Another team like the Hornets going into next year saying, hey, we're back in the number 1 sweepstakes next year.
You're not. What's exciting about that pathway is that you're not cutting Damian Lillard. You're gonna get a nice.
You're gonna get a great package for him. Yeah, exactly.
So you're not just building around Scoot Henderson, which is a hell of a.
Which is a good starting point.
Hell of a starting point. And Anthony Simons and Shaden Sharp. You're also building around. If you're trading him to, Philly, you might get Tyrese Maxey, or you might get whoever else you might get. If you're trading him to I don't know, like Boston, you might get Jaylen Brown, like whoever, right. Whatever that player or whoever that team, that wants to make a move to get Damian Lillard, you're getting a hell of a package back. So, I think that may wind up being the right move, but I just don't know if I trust that organization right now.
Okay, next one here, fact or fiction. The drop off in talent from picks 4 to 14 is minimal. Fact or fiction?
I think that this is major facts. I think that this draft is, yes, the top of the draft. There seems to be a clear tier 1. I think tier 2 in this draft. There's a clear tier 1. It's Victor Wembanyama, and there's no one else.
Right, and then there's everybody else. Right.
Tier 2 might be pretty clear in terms of it's Miller and Scoot by themselves for the most part. If that's the case, I think tier 3 is really big. I think that there are a lot of guys that fit into that third tier. I think you're talking about obviously the Thompson twins and overtime elite fit into that conversation. But then when you're talking about college basketball as well, I think that there's a lot of value to be had in this draft in the back half of the lottery. I think that's arguably, in my opinion, the strength of this draft is not necessarily picking at 4 or 5. I mean, obviously you want to pick as high as you can, but I think the most value to be had is if you're picking at 9 or 10. And there are players in this draft, in my opinion, a guy like Keontae George, who might go anywhere, who might be outside of the top 10.
He might outside the top 10, right, exactly.
That I think could wind up being the second or third best player in this draft. You got guys like, Nick Smith, who was the number 1 player coming out of high school. You got, particularly that guard sort of, conglomerate that we have in that second half of the first round. Anthony Black is a guy who's really rising. And then you've got guys like Cam Whitmore and, Jarris Walker, who we'll see how high they go. But I think that there's a lot of interchangeability between a lot of these guys in that range. So I really do like that second half of the lottery in this draft.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm gonna agree. I'm gonna say that this is a fact. I think that here's what I will say. Well, I think this is a fact. I think maybe we still think of this differently. I don't think that once you get outside the top 3, I think the talent is a major drop off. So while yes, the group is close in talent, I do think that there are going to be landmines because deciphering these guys is very difficult.
Exactly. Really, that's why
it is a beauty in the eye of the beholder. Like, there are guys I like. I'm sure there are guys that you like, and we'll agree with some, we'll disagree on some. But what I think is going to happen is, like, you're going to have guys drafted in the top 14 that are, like, I don't know, going to be, like, barely second contract guys.
And that's why.
That's why I say, I mean, yeah, maybe so, because you could get a guy at 6 who's awful and a guy at 10 who ends up being really good or pretty decent. But I think the problem is, like there's not really the superstar talent per se. I agree, Keontae George is a guy that I would eyeball, and I'm surprised that he's not really getting seen higher in some of these mock drafts. But some of these other guys, it would scare me taking these guys. So I'm going to agree with you, but I don't know if I necessarily love the talent pool that is there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree too. Like, I don't, like, I would hate to be, like, obviously Pistons fans are upset right now.
Yeah.
And they should be, obviously. But, like, I'd hate to be drafting 5 in this draft because I'd just be like,
this is...
shoot, You know,
Yeah,
the
there's
guy
a
that gets that
high
extra
there's a
chance to
high miss opportunity.
yeah,
Like,
the high miss opportunity.
yeah,
Whereas like three, you don't have to think that much. You're probably
yeah.
taking Brandon Miller. You're
And
probably
if you
taking
miss at 12, like it's bad, but you're like, all right. I mean, we're a
right.
team that
Yeah,
almost made
I
the
didn't really get a
playoffs.
chance to pick the guy I really wanted.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
is what it is. But like, there's a chance saying, hey, I think the guy we got at 12 is better than the team that drafted at 7, the guy they got. So
100%.
that's yeah. So it goes back and forth. I think that is a good point in terms of the
You're not paying
value.
him as much. The value is not the exact same, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a good point on your end. All right, one more here. I want to ask you here. Fact or fiction? Oh, yeah, two more. Fact or fiction? Brandon Miller will be the only college player drafted in the top 5.
I'm going to say fiction. I'm going to say fiction. I think uh, this is one of those questions where I don't know for a fact who it is. I think there are multiple different guys who could fit that description. Obviously, there is a chance where it's, the same top three, and then you have both Thompson twins, and that's no college players outside of Miller. But I think there's a pretty good chance we get, in my opinion, I think Jarris Walker to Detroit is just an excellent fit
Yeah.
for them. It's not Victor Wembanyama, but I think he's an excellent fit next to Jalen Duren long term in the front court. So I'd be surprised if Walker fell past 5. But then I think Cam Whitmore also fits the mold of a guy that could go in the top 5 as well. And a guy I wouldn't sleep on going high like that. I know you have a guy that you like, but that you'll probably mention. But I'm going to mention Anthony Black. I think Anthony Black tested really well athletically at the combine. Not really known for his bounce or for his athleticism, but I think he's a guy that is probably a little bit more athletic than people realize. And obviously his size, feel for the game at 6'8", being able to play point guard full time at Arkansas, and be one of the better players that arguably that they've had in program history.
Right.
I think Black is a guy that would not shock me. I don't love the teams that are drafting in the top 5 for Anthony Black, although he's a Texas guy. Do the Rockets, lead him ahead of Thompson? Probably not. But if someone decides to move up, does he fit that mold? Who knows?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I'm gonna say this is a fact as well. I agree. So let's break this down. You got Wembanyama, you got Miller, obviously, and then you got Scoot Henderson. Those are obviously the top 3. If somehow Scoot falls to 4 because maybe the players don't like the fit or the team that goes up there wants someone different, I like. Okay, maybe that happens. He's gonna be in the top 4. So those are 3 of the 4 picks. So you're looking at 2 spots essentially. I expect one of them to be the one of the Thompson twins. That would surprise me if neither of those guys drafted in the top 5. So you're looking at really one spot. I think you're right with Walker. I think you're right with Whitmore. Both of those guys I think are decent fits in Detroit. The guy that you probably think I'm going to mention that I agree needs to be in that conversation is Taylor Hendricks. Hendricks is an excellent shooter. Hendricks is an excellent shot blocker. I think in many ways he may be the best fit next to Duren, especially because he's such a poor rebounder. And if you want to hide him as a rebounder, putting him next to that monster in Jalen Duren and probably will go a long way. Hendricks is a little thin, doesn't necessarily play as much physicality as you like, but the guy is so long, so rangy. One of my favorite players. Reminds me a lot of Jaren Jackson in this draft. So I think those guys, all 3 of those guys, Walker, Whitmore, Hendricks at the 4, all of them make sense. And the Black's an interesting one too because I think the one thing about the Pistons, I don't think anybody knows exactly what they're trying to build, but it does appear like they're trying to be a team with some length and some athleticism. And whatever they end up developing into, if you do have Black as a combo guard with Cade Cunningham, and then you got the speed of Ivy, and you got the athleticism of Duren, and then you got the athleticism of Wiseman, like you're starting to see something coming together. I see a team that can be very physically imposing, very athletic, and kind of maybe like a Memphis East happening. So I kind of like what they're cooking, even if it's in the very infant stages, and maybe they're going to have to consolidate some of these pieces at some point. But Black would fit in pretty well with that. So those are all college players. So I agree. I think that would be the case. I think I'd be surprised if both Thompson twins went in the top 5. Though it wouldn't shock me. That is how you get that scenario where you don't have another player besides Brandon Miller as a college player drafting that top 5. But very interesting discussion nonetheless. And then we got one more here. So last one, there will be no non-freshmen selected in the lottery. So we're talking, and that includes, of course, Victor Wembanyama would have been a freshman if he played college basketball. So, your 18, 19-year-old guys, 1 year removed from high school. There will be no players, non-freshmen or 1 year removed from college, 1 year high school rather, will be selected in the lottery. Fact or fiction?
I'm gonna go fiction here. I think that there are multiple guys that could potentially fit this bill. I would be shocked. I'd be floored if Jordan Hawkins is in the lottery pick. I'd borderline be. I wouldn't say I'd be surprised, but I guess I would say I would not be surprised if he goes in the top 10.
Yeah.
So there are mock drafts out there that have him outside the top 20. So it's not crazy to say that he won't get drafted in the lottery, but I think he will rise as we get closer to this draft. But another guy that I think could fit that bill as well is Chris Murray from Iowa. Obviously, very much older player. We're not talking about a guy, Jordan Hawkins, sophomore. Chris Murray is going to be 23 by the time Summer League rolls around. But I think we're talking about a guy that, just based off what his brother did, not only what his brother did his rookie year, obviously what Chris Murray did, obviously, in his junior year at Iowa, but then you couple that with what Keegan did in Sacramento in his rookie year, and I think teams understand what they're signing up for with Chris Murray, both from a basketball maturity standpoint, a ready to play standpoint, and a guy who's got a high level NBA skill set. I mean, my comp for Keegan Murray last year was Danny Granger. And I think Chris Murray,
pretty good comparison. I think it's held up pretty well this season.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of what we saw from year one. I think Chris Murray, not as talented maybe as his brother, but I think offers a lot of the same skills as well. So I'd be surprised. I mean, the age is a thing, but I mean, his brother went fourth. Brother ended up going higher than I think a lot of people thought. So I think if there's a team that's in this draft that's trying to win now, like maybe New Orleans, or somebody like that, that's like, we don't need a 18-year-old that we're trying to develop. Like, we need a guy who can help us right away if that's what we're trying to do is win. I think a team like that would love Chris Murray.
Yeah, New Orleans, to me, Toronto, Dallas, you could argue Orlando on a second pick, and you could even maybe argue 9 at Utah are teams that I don't know if they're clamoring to get like some 18-year-old. Like, like those are teams that were pretty close to making the playoffs. I think Washington even at 8, you could say. I mean, I think that also was kind of their team. Also, they're kind of like Portland East. Like they had kind of an identity crisis. What they're doing with Bradley Beal and some of the guys they have, and they have of course Kuzma's a free agent. So. Like, there are teams there that I can see them saying, is it worth signing a 19-year-old, an 18-year-old kid here, drafting them, and knowing that they're not going to contribute for 2 or 3 years, potentially. So, I agree. I don't think that that's the case. I think that there will be at least one. I think Hawkins is a borderline lock for the lottery, though I agree. I've been surprised some of those mock drafts that don't have him there. So, Hawkins, to me, is a guy who's a clear candidate. I agree. I think Keegan Murray's success in year 1 will help Chris Murray's draft stock here. I wouldn't be surprised if someone takes a flyer on him. And a third guy I'll throw in there in terms of a non-freshman who maybe leaps and finds his way to sneak into the lotteries. I'll go Colby Jones at Xavier. Highly efficient player. I think the analytics on him will be very favorable for teams that lean into that. So teams that may be looking for an older player who can contribute right away, maybe Colby Jones makes sense in the late lottery. So I think that there are some options there that wouldn't shock me. I agree. I don't think that this will be a draft where it's just all 19, 18-year-olds getting drafted in that lottery. But it won't be a lot. I think 2, 3 probably be max, but that's all you need to, of course, make this a fiction statement, which is what I'm going. I'm going fiction here.
Yeah, no, I see that as well. And, it's... honestly, I think there are some good upperclassmen in this draft. I just,
they're all going later.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
doesn't feel like that's where the mock drafts have some of these guys. Like Jalen Wilson, in my opinion, is going to be
yeah,
an NBA player.
yeah.
You
He had
know,
a bad combine scrimmage performances, but I don't know. He's one of the guys I wouldn't worry too much about, like what he looks like in a scrimmage.
yeah. Trace Jackson Davis, another guy I think is going to be an NBA
I
player.
love Tracy Jackson Davis. Yes.
Like these guys may not go in the lottery, but I think teams, Marcus Sasser, like these teams are going to like the guys that they end up getting if they do take them.
What do you guys think of this edition of New Generation Media's Fact or Fiction? Do you agree with some of these statements? Will you be seeing a trade at number 3? What do we think about the number 2 pick with Brandon Miller? Will there be a non-freshman taken in that top end there? Give us a like and a comment. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you think about this video. And, of course, make sure you subscribe to New Generation Media and check out our podcast, New Generation Podcast Network. You can get not just New Generation Sports Talk, where we talk hoops and all other sports. You can also get Hero Talk, where we talk superheroes. You can get Imperial Broadcast, where we talk Star Wars. So plenty of good stuff there. So thank you guys so much for checking us out. We'll be back with another video and covering plenty of stuff during this draft season. So make sure you keep it locked here. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.